Hey everybody, I'm Ray over at Seagrape. I'm the Events and Community Witch. I'm super excited to talk with Jezmina today. It's going to be a super juicy class. Oop, there we are. She's on her way. We're going to be talking a lot about uh, divination in all of its forms. Oh, and there's Jezmina. Let's see if we can get her to add as a moderator. Everyone, except having a little Mercury moment, are we? There we are.
Hi. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Oh, I'm super excited to talk about everything. How's your day been so far?
It has been good. I've mostly been preparing classes for October, which has been great.
Yay! Perfect. So we're right in the mode for it. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody that's on here? We've got a bunch of people joining us. Hi, y'all. Um, but yeah, let's do some introductions and then we can pop into some questions. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm Jezmina Von Tila, they pronouns. Um, and I'm a writer, educator, podcast co-host of Romanistan Podcast, a podcast about culture and roots and like that. And I'm also a tarot, tea leaf, and palm reader. My tradition on my mom's side, and that is mostly all the things. I'm a performer as well.
Wonderful. Great. I am having a little tough time hearing you. It's cutting in and out. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Oh, except now.
How about now? We're back.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So, thank you so much for introducing yourself. I think everyone is super excited to talk about the class. So why don't we dive on in? Tell us about like your magic and how divination is like the root of it and how it lives in your life every single day.
So I am really fortunate that I am really close to my grandmother, and she had come over from Germany in the 50s, escaping the even post-Nazi Germany was bad. So she came over, and she had left her family behind, and she really felt like being in America. There was so much of her Romani culture that she couldn't share or show, especially having to hide it back in Germany. But she really wanted me to have a sense of her heritage, her culture, and especially our work. And so she was really proud of her family being from a really long line of the women doing fortune telling and dancing, which was, of course, interrupted by the war. And so the idea of her coming over to America and then having this granddaughter who she felt like, had some signs. I had like laid my hands on her when I was 4 and took her arthritis pain and threw it across the room and like went on toddling, and she was like, okay. So this one, and because she was very specific too, she didn't want to teach my mom or auntie, partially because she had just immigrated and maybe wasn't personally ready. Well, she did teach them, but she didn't train them to do it for work.
Gotcha.
And so the idea is that she trained me to do it for work if I wanted to. And we started about that time. And so fortune telling and folk magic practices have always been a very normal part of my life, which I really appreciate. And we started with palmistry, moved our way to the cards and tea leaves. And a lot of my everyday magic is just very practical. It's the way that I cook, clean, bathe, pray, like sleep. It's just kind of a part of how I live my life.
I love that. Would you mind kind of going into what that's like as far as how is palmistry a part of your life? I know you said professionally, but how is tea leaf reading a part of your life? Because I feel like there's so many folks that are drawn to these types of practices, but like don't have a starting point, and that's the whole point of the class, right? Like being seen and in community and having the safety to explore. So could you dive a little bit into what those aspects look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even if you're not planning on becoming a professional palm reader, tea leaf reader, or tarot reader, they're a really beautiful addition to your life. Palmistry is an amazing way to get to know the people you love on a much deeper level. The
Mm-hmm.
idea is that you're reading what's written on their body. The lines on their palm reflect major areas of their life, but also the shape of their hands, their fingers, their fingernails. Everything tells you something about their nature.
That's
And
awesome.
so whether you're on a first date with someone and you want to do something cute to scope them out, or,
That's
or if you're
precious.
with your best friend, I think palmistry is a really wonderful part of getting to know the people around you more intimately. Even just the act of holding someone's hand and letting them tell you about their life, their struggles, their hopes, their dreams, and you giving them some guidance based on what you see is really healing and powerful. We don't often sit with a stranger and hold their hand and talk about their feelings, or even our good friends, or even sometimes our partners. So I
Yeah,
think
that
palmistry is
connection. I
really
love
wonderful.
that.
Yeah, the way that I learned was very community based, and so it was really normal. On Sunday afternoons, everyone would come over for a big breakfast. We'd make like blini, like little crepes with like sour
Yeah.
cream and fruit,
Um,
and drink tea and coffee, and then catch up and give each other advice based on what was coming up in the tea leaves. And so, you can have tea leaf reading or coffee reading as a daily practice. I mean, I love a morning cup of something hot to start the day.
you.
But, infusing your intentions, what you want to know, any specific questions in a cup, and then learning how to interpret them. It's such a really beautiful, dreamy practice. Like the tarot has these set symbols that we use, whereas tea leaf reading is very dependent upon your personal symbols or the
Yeah.
person you're reading for. And then a daily tarot practice is also just like a beautiful, like draw a card if you have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, someone told me to draw a card to see why my dog kept peeing in her dog bed, and she got the Nine of Cups, and I'm like, she just loves it. Like, you don't have to take it so seriously. you can,
So great.
you can have fun with it.
That's wonderful. Do you have any advice for folks that feel drawn to this practice? Like, I know, for instance, with me, I always thought tarot was interesting, and I kind of went into it with this idea of I can at least learn the symbols. Maybe it's not like a divination, but as I grew into the love of it, it became a part of my daily self-care routine,
Mm.
sitting and having a cup of coffee and reading some cards. But anyway, that was a little bit of a ramble. But do you have any advice for folks that are curious?
Yeah, I think it's really good to be playful with your work, and I think it's wonderful to also get your friends and family involved if they're open to it, because reading for yourself all the time is great self-care, and then most people find that there are certain things that they really struggle to read for themselves, especially if it's something they're really worried about or really really want, and they need a little outside perspective.
Yeah.
And so then people might go to readers or something like that. But I think that when you're learning, and really think of it as like a community building,
Yeah.
and you get to know not just the divinatory tool better, but also the people you love or care about, or even just like lovely strangers a little better too. It's
Yeah.
very human practice, and it's a practice in compassion as well as magic. And so the idea of creating safe spaces for people as you read is,
Mm-hmm.
part of your integrity, as well as, you get to practice your ethics that way by being, if you're doing a reading for someone, you're being supportive to them, ideally. So I
Totally.
think start there.
I love that. One question that I often get from friends, but also here in the shop, is like, how do you define divination? Because you were speaking about fortune telling and it being a
Mhm.
work and it being your culture. So, how would you frame that out for people? What is divination? What is fortune telling? What is self care? What is community building, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing because, so, Roma are a diasporic ethnic group originally from India, but a long time ago, around the 10th century, and have been persecuted through the centuries. And moving west, brought a lot of trades with them, but they were also limited to those trades like fortune telling, metalworking, horse trading, performing, all those things, because of discrimination. And so, in a really practical sense, divination, I think for a lot of Roma, is survival.
Yeah.
And Some Roma see it as kind of like common sense therapy, using it with
Yeah.
like these tools, and other Roma see it as a very magical practice. Some Roma believe that intuition is so important for some of us within the culture, because not all Roma fortune tell or even like it, that because for survival of trying to find out where you're safe, where you can be,
Mhm.
really paying attention to signs and omens outside of yourself, but also within your practice. And so intuition as a survival tool, as a tool for commerce, and also a tool for healing, is really my experience with it. I think it's very multifaceted. But I like to, whenever, someone sits down for a reading with me, I like to say that we think of fortune telling as a helpful tool to see what's going on around you and think about how you might like to navigate things. But ultimately, things change. You have free will. Even the lines on your palm change over time. You
Yeah.
get to do what you want. And so I like to see it as, you know, for me personally, think about connecting with my ancestors and spirit guides and deity when I'm reading for someone. And I think of it as a tool for the divine, and me just sort of trying to be a good conduit,
Hmm.
um, and like a human presence for somebody. But I think you can view it a lot of different ways. I've read for atheists before who thought that fortune telling felt very Jungian, and they just really enjoyed connecting with archetypes and just the
Yeah.
process of talking something out with somebody. And so I think however you conceive of it is really valuable. It's all about making sure you're doing what feels good to you.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that divination is about connecting to your intuition, connecting with others, and then connecting to what's outside yourself, if that's something that you believe in, and connecting to archetypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely love that. Does that translate to, um, because you're doing a 3-day class. I'm so excited because it's
Yeah.
like this beautiful deep dive into these amazing practices. So does that apply to every facet? Like how does that live in tea leaf reading? How does that live in tarot and
That's
palmistry?
such a good question. Yeah, it lives in different ways in all of those places. And so, tarot is a kind of easy one. We're like, sure, that's full of archetypes and symbols. The palm is really interesting because every hand shape is related to a dominant element. And so some people might have more fire, water, earth, or air in their palm. Occasionally you'll get like a little bit of a spicy combo of something, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, there's a lot of archetypal work thinking about like, what does this element mean that it dominates
Mm-hmm.
me? Or what does it mean that I have more water in my thumb and more fire in the rest of my palm?
Yeah.
And then there are the lines themselves, which, have really interesting landscapes where you can, look at different features of the line. But then ideally, in Intro to Palmistry, I'll be teaching what does all this stuff mean, basics kind of stuff. I do a Palmistry 2 class because there's so much, and I could probably do a Palmistry 3 too if anyone ever wanted. But
Yeah, we love that.
yeah, and so the idea is that you learn all of these lines so then you can start to see the symbols and stories moving underneath. And so I might be looking at someone's headline, and just as I'm gazing at it and kind of taking it in, I see, sure, it splits in 2 directions, which means maybe they pick up a second subject later in their life. But something about it looks like a little snake about to bite an apple. And I'm like, oh, so you're like reclaiming forbidden knowledge of the body. And they're like, yes. And so like that symbol is meaningful to me, and it might be meaningful to them. But the idea is that you're really starting to use the tool as a way to open up your intuition
Yeah.
and that communication. And it's the same with tea leaf reading because you're looking for any symbols or shapes, letters, numbers that you recognize. And so you can have a whole story unfold in a cup with really meaningful symbols to you. And archetypes show up there all the time. Like, is there a kind of like dark mother energy and this dragon that you see in the cup, or is this like ancient wisdom that's coming through? Like, it's really, really fun, and just it's meant for you to find a structure that you can then play within and kind of unlock your connection to the universe.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that distinction between the way that you interpret and the way that you communicate is such a huge deal because I think a lot of folks I've seen are looking for like books that have exact interpretations,
Mm-hmm.
but how you connect to the symbols is such a strong and necessary thing whenever you're practicing these types of things.
Oh, definitely.
Um, I had a really funny one now that we're talking about personal symbols. Do you have any like funny, juicy, super powerful stories that you want to tell everyone? Because I think uh, we sometimes take ourselves too seriously when we're curious and we're like a little scared or whatnot. But I'd love to hear a couple of stories if you have them.
Yes, I have a lot of stories. um, well, okay, I have a couple. So the first one was of not taking yourself too seriously. I had this great client who just cracks me up. She has a real, oh, why can't I think of her now? She's queer icon. She was in Best in Show and she was in White Lotus. Jennifer Coolidge. She has real Jennifer Coolidge vibes. And she was just like, I'm just, I'm not in the mood for a relationship. I just want to know if I'm going to get a big dick in the future. And I started cracking up and I was like, I'm so glad you're here. I would love to look into this for you. And so I was shuffling the cards and the first card I pulled was the Ace of Wands. And I was like, girl, yes.
Love that.
It's like literally a hand holding a giant stick. It's just like,
That's perfect.
it's gonna be fire. So I think it's important to remember that the literal interpretations of cards that you get are really just a jumping off point. Like, what does the Ace of Wands mean to you? Sure, it's a new thing, but for her it was new dick, and that was what she needed to know, and that's what the cards told me. And so that's one.
Imagery plus definition plus experience plus situation,
It's everything. Context is everything. And another one that I think is kind of fun is that I think that a lot of people are afraid to sound silly.
Yeah.
And especially silly if they're having maybe some kind of information come to them in a way that they're not used to. Mm-hmm. And so I am predominantly, visual, auditory, and I usually have like a strong, like internal, like emotional feeling. I don't usually get physical feelings until recently. And so I was noticing that when I was reading for people, I was like, why is my nose so itchy? I look like a monster. Like, I just want to tear my nose off my face. And then I was like, why am I getting like the stinging feeling in my face? And as I was reading, I was so focused on just like, I just got to focus on the reading. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me after that happening a couple of times, I was like, oh, I'm getting information. And so I had to pause and be like, what? and, and in this case, the thing that I was getting on my cheek, it was like, I'm a cricket. It felt like a little cricket, like rubbing its legs together, like right at my temple. And I was like, okay, well, what? And I was like, tell her that I'm a cricket and I'm here. And I was like, okay. And so I was, reading someone's palm and I was like, have you been thinking a lot about crickets with respect to the death work you've been doing? And she was like, yes, a lot. And I was like, okay, I'm going to tell you something weird. Just hold on. So I had to like have this little conversation with this little cricket that was perched on my cheekbone. And it was the weirdest thing, but I was like, well, this is just what's happening now. This is my intuition is shifting or changing. This is a new way that I sense things. So I'm just going to go with it. And so for the rest of the day, that was just a couple of days ago, that kept happening. Occasionally I would have a physical thing and someone would be like, I'm a bee. And I'm like, okay. So, I think just be weird. Like, I think that's a really good thing to do is just, you can say like, I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you, but here's the thing, but here's what's coming up for me. And I think just be curious if something feels different to you in your body as you're reading for someone, or if you keep getting a thought, don't try to push it away and be like, I got to focus on what I'm doing. Just be present with it because, the things work mysteriously. Just roll with it.
Absolutely. I know we're coming up on time and I've just loved this conversation so much. Do you have any thoughts or notes that you want to tell the folks about the class before we end here? I know I could talk to you about this kind of stuff for hours, but that's really what the class is for. It's 3 whole days of juicy, juicy goodness. But is there anything else that you would like to tell everyone about the class before we come to a close?
Yes, I would. So the first thing is that I'm only one small perspective of Romani fortune telling. And so definitely follow Romana Sun podcast and my personal account. Also, I follow a lot of really cool Roma activists, readers. We've interviewed a bunch of them. And so don't just listen to me, like really listen to the community at large. I'm only one experience, and I can only speak for myself. And then the other thing is I think that if you're worried about, do I want to sign up for all three of these? Maybe I'm only interested in one, or I don't know about the other ones. I'd say if you're feeling like a call to it, just go for it, because palmistry, tea leaf reading, and tarot reading are all very different types of divination, but they're very complementary. And so palmistry teaches you how to read someone based on their body, which is huge. Like, just getting vibes about someone is like, you're already kind of doing that. So why not take that to the next level? Then tea leaf reading is about learning your own personal symbolism, and it's also very connected to dreams, to ancestors, and to ritual. And so there's a kind of, that's how to tap into that free form of like, I think there's a cricket on my, that kind of thing. And then the tarot is, of course, there's so many books written on tarot, and I'm doing a kind of foundational, like if you've never really read tarot before, feel like maybe you've looked at a few books, or you want to start a practice, you don't know how, I'm going to be introducing you to how I remember certain cards, kind of like little cheat sheets for navigating your way through, so you can then riff on things when they come up, like the Ace of Wands if someone's asking about dating or something. And so, yeah, I think that it'll be very comprehensive, and these arts are complementary, and it's like once you learn how to do these three things, you can basically do anything.
I love that. I'm super excited. You can find the link in our bio if you'd like to sign up, everybody that's still here. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to dive in with you and with everyone that signs up.
Yay.
But yeah, I hope that you have a wonderful day and experience a few crickets.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening, and hope to see you in class. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.